Welcome to Hunger for Change, the podcast where we shake up health myths and meet some of the most creative minds in wellness. I'm Niklas Gustafson, your host, and today I'm super excited to chat with Dr. Gould. Dr. Gould is not your ordinary dentist. He's on a mission to fill our lives with health by tackling sleep apnea and guiding us back to our roots with his modern hunter-gatherer philosophy. Dr. Gould has an impressive talent for connecting the dots between our mouths and our overall health. He's all about the power of vitamin D, making sure our airways are clear, and boosting our mitochondria, the tiny powerhouses inside our cells. He also dives into the science of deuterium, a lesser known but crucial factor in our well-being. He's here to share his insights and tips on how we can all live better, breathe easier, and thrive in our modern world. So let's get this conversation started with Dr. Joel Gould. I'm thrilled to have you. Thank you.
Excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
First of all, what does health mean to you?
Health is something that I could never take for granted. And if you don't have your health, you have nothing. Money means nothing if you don't have your health. Now, in these days, money is important, unfortunately, to try and regain or gain your health. But as somebody who was sick most of my adult life, regaining my health changed everything for me. And it was profound enough for me to want to get out there and share my message with everyone.
When you say regain your health, what does that mean?
So I suffered as a child. I was one of those sickly kids. I had my tonsils out at age 4, colds, flus, ear infections, you name it, allergies. And I started to gain weight at the age of probably about 8 or 9. And then I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease at age 14. Crohn's disease is an autoimmune disease, and it's an embarrassing digestive bathroom syndrome. And, you know, it's tough enough being a 14-year-old if you're feeling healthy, but this was something that destroyed my life, my confidence, and my doctors medicated me with steroids, and it ruined my physical body, ruined my mental health. And it wasn't until the age of 48 that completely by accident, I recovered my health and discovered some profound things about not just my health, but our health, really as a species on this planet. And so for me to be able to regain my health, those were the best years of my life that were taken away unnecessarily. And even though I did the best that I could with what I had, my goal really is to prevent children from going through exactly what happened to me. And really the worst thing is that over time, it's gotten worse. And whereas in those days, it was not normal, I was one of few people who were sick. These days, many, many children are suffering exactly the same.
So you were 48 when you regained your health completely.
Yeah, that's correct. It was basically when I discovered who Weston Price was, that changed my life. And from there forwards, you know, I found a couple of other experts that allowed me to see health the way that it really is versus what we're being presented with, and even really what I learned in traditional dental school.
I'd like to know more about Weston Price. Who are they?
To start that discussion, I like to always say to anyone listening to me, who am I and why should you care? And especially because I'm a dentist. So my story is, this is my 34th year practicing dentistry, and I practice both in Canada and the United States, and I've loved my profession. It's been wonderful. And part of the reason why I went to dentistry was because my health wouldn't allow me to be a medical doctor. A doctor in an operating room can't leave to go to the bathroom 10 times in the middle of a procedure. So dentistry really suited me. I love sciences, I'm artistic, and I think every dentist is a frustrated artist. So really, it was a good profession for me. And I had an excellent education in Canada. I was very pleased. But it wasn't until I discovered another Canadian dentist by the name of Weston A. Price. And to anyone who doesn't recognize that name, you're certainly not alone. If you really want to see something, I think it's scandalous. He published a book in 1938 called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And the essence of his message was eat a whole natural food animal diet, avoid processed foods, sugar, bleach, flour, and industrial seed oils. And frightening, almost 100 years later, that's some of the root cause of what's keeping the population of the world sick. So when I wasn't presented with Weston Price's information in dental school, which is, I think it's shocking, I think it's scandalous, and it's really a shame. Even if they brought his work up to say this guy is nuts, and I'd like to break down why they would think he's nuts, but he was one of the first people to recognize the blue zones. These are the areas globally where we want to look at people's health to say, what are they doing right? Like it's some mystery. It's no mystery to me anymore. But Weston A. Price traveled the world with his wife and his camera, mercifully, and photographed different Aboriginal populations as they were just coming into contact with modern society. And what he discovered, and what he really should be known for is the modern father of epigenetics. Genetics are our genes, our DNA, what we get from our mother and our father, and epigenetics literally means above genetics, and that is what controls how we actually utilize our own DNA and the blueprint of who we are. Yeah. So Weston Price, at a time, especially a difficult time, 1938, we know that in Nazi Germany, what was happening, and that story is all about eugenics, and it still is. Eugenics is deciding who someone is based on how they were born, what's their genetic makeup. And at the time, Weston Price was really concerned with why his patients' teeth were falling apart. And he wanted to find people who had great teeth still, who had still room for all of their 32 teeth and didn't have decay. And he found twins where he was able to compare the dental health between one who was eating the modern foods and one who was sticking to a more traditional diet. And what he really discovered is that the destruction of the jaw could happen just in one generation. That's not a genetic issue. That's an environmental issue. And at the time, the thought process was it was the mixing of races that was breaking down the jaw, where it's actually the opposite. The more genetic variability you have, the healthier the person is going to be. So it's very interesting and unique that at that time in history, he came out with this paradigm, and he was a scientist. He was a very smart guy. And his book, I say to anyone, read the first 30 pages and you'll want to read more. But it even goes into how to do proper farming without chemical fertilizers. It's a manual that's really there for anyone to see of the way we should be living.
Interesting. So what is behind the destruction of our jaw?
It's something that's shockingly simple. And basically, I want to boil it down to the easiest thing for people to understand is that our bones are full of calcium. Our teeth are full of calcium. And so when we want to have jaw growth, we need to have that calcium for our actual jaws to grow. When we see a low vitamin D, so people know vitamin D is important for bone growth. Why? Because vitamin D allows our bodies to take in calcium. We need that calcium for really two reasons. One is for cellular signaling, and the other is for our actual structure, our bones, the rigid framework that we have as our bones. This is a bank of calcium. And so the regulation of calcium coming into our body through our food, getting into our bloodstream, and getting into our bones is paramount for natural jaw growth. But also imagine this, if you don't have enough calcium. Now, we know people get rickets, and that's soft bones that start to deform. The dental manifestations of rickets are massive, just basically improper tooth generation because there's no calcium. But when we have enough vitamin D to not have rickets, we still need to understand that the teeth themselves are highly calcified. And if there's not enough calcium coming in, the jaw won't grow. It's a little more complex, but there won't be enough calcium to make teeth. And myself personally, I only have one lower molar. I don't have 3 molars like everyone else does. Why? Because I specifically had a severe vitamin D and then a second very important vitamin K2. And it's the combination of D3 and K2 that regulates calcium in, and where does that calcium go? D brings in calcium. Vitamin K2 helps to put that calcium, instead of it ending up in your arteries, into your actual teeth and bones. And we see the enzymes that bind calcium in the mouth. And without vitamin K2, these enzymes don't work. So on a very scientific level, vitamin K2 is a cofactor for the enzymes that bind and regulate calcium in your body. If you can't get calcium into your body and you can't put it where it's supposed to go, one of the things that's going to suffer is the lower jaw growth and also the ability of your body to make teeth. So that's the primary issue that we're having. And of course, this spreads out to many different things, but it's as simple as that. And tragically, simple supplementation of both of those chemicals would result in dental health and a lack of need for orthodontics. There's one more component that we spoke about earlier, and that's airway. Is it how does the jaw develop? Everyone's talking about James Nestor in his book, Breathe. He's missing a giant portion of this, and that is the biochemical component and how an airway forms. I think there's a lot of terrible disinformation. People are taping their mouth, which if it works for you, that's great. But we need to think about root cause. That and I like to always talk about bruxism. I don't know how prevalent bruxism is in Europe, but I think it's probably the same as here. Bruxism is clenching and grinding, the clenching and grinding of your teeth. And where I like to think about bruxism is, this is the example of allopathic medicine. So when I ask somebody if they grind their teeth, they say, "Oh, I wear a grinding guard."
Yeah.
And I say, "Well, but that's an allopathic treatment. If you grind your teeth, you're going to put something in there so you don't destroy your teeth. But what's the root cause?"
Exactly. So what is the root cause?
The root cause is vitamin D deficiency. And to anyone, and people will probably post, I see a lot of posts after I go on a show, but people will post it as parasites, which I believe is technically nonsense. I don't believe there's any studies to support that. However, once you understand what vitamin D does to the gut microbiome and the immune system, maybe it is parasites, but it's in people with very low vitamin D. So we have, babies 3-4 years old. If your child, and I want to give a plea to any parents listening to this. If your child grinds their teeth in sleep or snores, right?
Yeah.
This is severe vitamin D deficiency.
So why do we grind our teeth when we have low vitamin D? I don't understand.
Well, it starts to be a little complex. So what is bruxism? Well, I want to think about, this is going to take us back to our modern hunter-gatherers philosophy.
Yeah.
So our bodies were created by the environment of Earth out in the sun. So plants came first. And then as we got more sophisticated, we evolved to animals, and animals are solar powered as well. Mother Nature is smart. She would never get rid of technology that worked. And of course, we incorporate some of it into our bodies in so many different ways. Vitamin D is just one of the photochemical products that we make when we're in the sun. It's a profound one because it's a sort of a proxy for season in our bodies. So what we're actually seeing is when we don't put our bodies out into the environment that we evolved in, we're literally cutting ourselves off from the elements of life that created us. And you're in your studio, I'm in my virtual studio, and people think that this is where we live, but this is just a really beautiful gilded cage that we built for ourselves, literally for comfort and convenience. But we know animals in captivity get sick, and that's what's happening to us. We've been cut off from the essential elements that we need, and one of them is sunlight. So at this time in space, it's almost impossible to get people to go in the sun because they've been brainwashed that it causes cancer. So mercifully, vitamin D can be supplemented orally. So I can sort of get around those issues. So bruxism is a short circuit from the part of the brain that regulates the airway and breathing and sleep. And it's a manifestation of that short circuit. Your brain is wanting to send a very steady signal to your airway, but it can't because you don't have the right biochemistry. And I'd like you to think about this. We can live many, many months and even a year or two without food. We can live maybe 2 weeks at best without water. We can't live for more than 3 minutes without air. So our entire biology is centered and built around this area. The mouth, we communicate, we eat, we breathe. This is it. And if you look at the homunculus, the graphic representation for sensory innervation for the human body, you're going to see a giant tongue and big lips. This is what our brain is really paying attention to. You can lose your legs, you can lose your arms, you cannot lose your airway, you're dead. So when I see this bruxism is an epidemic, and it's literally a vitamin D deficiency, and it gets a little more complicated because of what vitamin D does to regulate the whole airway system. So how I like to speak about it is that children who are vitamin D deficient, they'll grind their teeth and they'll snore. They'll also wet the bed. They'll suck their thumb. If your child is sucking their thumb, do not force them to stop. They're using that as an appliance that I make as a dentist. I make something called the mandibular advancement device, and that holds the jaw open and forward. That's what that thumb sucking is. It's not because your child can't grow up. Your child is probably developmentally delayed because they're extremely vitamin D deficient. And again, wetting the bed, do not punish the kids for this. This is a vitamin D deficiency.
Also.
Yep. So when we give children, say age 3, 4, 5, people say, oh, I grind my teeth because I'm stressed. What is a 4-year-old stressed about? Nothing. So when you give this 4-year-old vitamin D, by the second, third, or fourth day, they stop grinding their teeth. And if you take away that vitamin D, they'll start again. So there are now studies that show bruxism is related to low vitamin D. I knew it right away because I ground my teeth my entire life. I made my first grinding guard in dental school when I was 21 years old. And it wasn't until I raised my vitamin D level that one day I stopped grinding my teeth. It was probably about 3-4 weeks into supplementation. And I was clenching during the day. I was wearing my grinding guard during the day. And to anyone watching this, if you can't stop clenching your teeth, you can't do this. This is your autonomic nervous system. This is the part of your brain that regulates all of your housekeeping duties, your heart rate, your digestion, your sleep. These are things we can't control. And what's happening is the breakdown of your brainstem is showing through first at night with grinding and then during the day. If you leave your vitamin D level low enough for long enough, of course, cancer is going to develop and you're technically going to die. But no doctor is thinking about it on this level because doctors don't learn about the vitamin D hormone and they don't understand all of its functions, which is, again, terrifying and scandalous. Yeah. So vitamin D isn't the only thing that I'm, interested in, but it's one of the main things because I like people to remember three things. Vitamin D3 regulates sleep, the immune system, and the gut microbiome. And the gut microbiome is probably the most important part of that because the immune system won't function well without the proper gut microbiome.
And how does vitamin D, or as you said, hormone, people keep saying it's a vitamin while it's a hormone, right? So how does it regulate the gut microbiome?
Well, so this is a hormone that we make on our skin from cholesterol, and our gut microbes also can preferentially utilize vitamin D. So remember that we came from single-celled organisms, and this particular chemical messenger, it's extremely important to the regulation of our DNA. This is a very profound epigenetic moderator. This is one of the chemicals that will decide which parts of your DNA you're going to copy. And I like to think of vitamin D as like your cell phone. When your battery in your cell phone goes down to about 20%, you see it says entering power saving mode. And so your phone's smart because it's like, whoa, there's not enough power. So we're going to shut down all non-essential functions in your phone so that at least it'll be alive. So don't worry. Your body does the same thing. And once you go below about 20 nanograms per milliliter, your body does exactly the same thing. It starts to shut down all of the frills and it gets down to just the basics. We're in starvation dying mode here. We're in hibernation mode. What does my body need to do to be alive? Not to thrive and not to be healthy. So because vitamin D is a hormone that's measured on a blood level, I like to think of it as a reservoir. And when that level gets really low, taking a supplement, people say, I take a multivitamin, I take 2,000 IU of vitamin D. You're never going to fill that up to the line where your body finally has all of this hormone to be able to access all of your DNA. And why does it want to access your DNA? To make enzymes and to make chemical mediators that will keep you healthy.
You said that, if you live somewhere in the world where it's dark, you don't have enough sun, or the sun that you need, you can supplement. But is there a risk of supplementing? Can you supplement like too much? Is there a D vitamin overdose?
So technically, yes. Even too much water can kill you if
Yeah.
So the dose really makes the poison. And so specifically about vitamin D, like I said, when we're in the sun, vitamin D is just one of the products we make. I think there's a more important chemical product called cholesterol sulfate that we make in the sun. And what I think is that at no time in humanity did people stay out of the sun. We didn't have central heat. And every hunter-gatherer who woke up on a chilly morning would be waiting for that sunrise to start to warm. And it wasn't that long ago that we didn't even have air conditioning and people lived outside.
Totally.
So we're really suffering from a lack of sunlight. And I also want to be clear that the gut microbiome, even though it's regulated by vitamin D, also sunlight itself is instrumental in what our gut microbiome is doing. So taking vitamin D is successful. I don't think it's optimum. And at a certain point when I was supplementing my vitamin D, I started to think, why am I taking this pill when I could be getting this naturally? As I learned more about what sunlight does in our body, then I started to get my vitamin D naturally. I will supplement, even here in Los Angeles, I will supplement when we get the time change because this is just to the border. There's a line where it's the vitamin D winter north of us. There's a line from Atlanta to Los Angeles. But in the winter, I have a job. I can't be out there. I could be out there at noon or solar noon, and I technically could keep my D level high, but I'm busy. And so I supplement, no problem, but I still get sunlight. I get sunlight in my eyes and I get sunlight on my skin. You know that sunlight now, they've found that it creates melatonin. So it's called subcellular melatonin, a whole different discussion. But that's when infrared radiation from sunlight hits your body. This is really critical because melatonin isn't just a sleep hormone. Sure, it is. but it's one of the most important anti-inflammatory chemicals. This regulates your superoxide dismutase, and this is important in mitochondria where we have all the free radicals. Melatonin welches all the damage of the free radicals, and we make it, it's in opposition to sunlight, and it's something that, when you spray melatonin on plants, they grow bigger. It's a fascinating hormone.
Okay, so be out in the sun, it's important. What about if you are afraid that you will get too much sun? And how should you, what about sunscreens, for example?
My opinion is that sunscreens cause cancer and they don't prevent it. And I think the statistics really show us that. I remember a time when my mother came home and said, kids, we're not eating meat anymore, or we're reducing our red meat, and everyone's starting to wear sunscreen. I'll never forget it, because these are the two lies. These are the two biggest lies that are still affecting people around the world. Meat, red specifically, is the healthiest food on the planet, and sunlight is instrumental to health and happiness. So I get questions on, so do I wear sunscreen? I don't, if I can help it. It's a little bit of education you have to do for yourself. Beef tallow is an excellent sunscreen. Coconut oil is an excellent sunscreen. And I use a shirt, a hat, titanium dioxide, zinc oxide, non-nanoparticle, and common sense. The biggest issue, when you put on sunscreen, you stop all of the UVB from penetrating you. And that UVB is what gives you a sunburn. That's your early warning system that your body needs.
Produces melanin, right?
Yes. So it does three things. Produces vitamin D, produces melanin, and produces a burn. So when you spray yourself with that sunscreen, you've eliminated the early warning.
You're blocking.
You're blocking it. Yeah. And then you stay in the sun all day after being inside for 2 months, and you're going to do terrible damage to your body because when you get rid of the vitamin D itself creates the enzymes that go into your DNA and repair it. Yeah. So you're blocking the repair system, and you're blocking your vitamin D production. So I think that parents who are putting sunscreen on their young babies, they're absorbing this. You absorb 60% of what you put on your skin. These are endocrine disruptors.
Totally.
Please think twice about putting sunscreen on your child.
You just mentioned the foundational 4. What is that?
So my work, everything that we're talking about, aside from, I have some information, more about sleep apnea and that type of stuff because I'm a dentist, and jaw growth, I think, is maybe a little more proprietary, but I didn't come up with any of this. I saw what you saw. I saw what was going on in the world, and I got upset that I tried my best to go to the powers that be. You already know that you can't go to NBC News and say, hey, I have some important information to say. And so at a certain point, my frustration became so real that I knew I needed to share this message. Again, I lost the best years of my life. And I knew that I'd be able to bring this information forward directly to the general public. And I knew I could do that through a TikTok type of understanding. Kids want singing, dancing, they want fun, they don't want to learn. And so I created cartoon characters of vitamins and minerals that sing and dance. And the foundational 4 over there, behind me, these are what I believe are causing 80% of the illness that's going on right in front of our eyes. And I say that if you supplement or pay attention to getting these 4 foundational elements, you're going to eliminate 80% of the illness. 20% of the general public is going to need to see a naturopathic doctor, to do other things. But this is a wide swath of people who will have their health restored by supplementing 4 simple things. So they are vitamin D3, vitamin K2, magnesium, and organic sulfur called MSM. And each of them plays a massive role in the creation of the destruction of our cardiovascular system. So modern medicine wants to find one thing. They're always looking for one thing. They're going to make a magic bullet. And there is no one thing that's causing heart disease. It's a couple of things together. Mother Nature doesn't work like that. She doesn't work in isolation. There's never just one thing. There's a combination of things. So to get this message out there, and really, so I didn't learn about Weston Price in school. People still haven't heard of him. I knew that I would have to take his information, his science, update it and modernize it, and do what he probably would have done if he were alive today, go directly to popular culture. And my intention is to insert these cartoon characters, these vitamins, minerals, and enzymes. I have a whole franchise called Enzymes, Mother Nature's Nanobots, and put them into popular culture so that kids can actually spend their time, instead of wasting their time in these games, online games that they're playing, the Fortnite and Roblox and all these things. Why not have your kids do exactly what they're doing, hanging out with their friends online, and gaming, why not have that information? Why not have that be informative? These are your child's formative years, and they're learning nothing, trolls and this and that. There's no content. So as a science geek, I loved science as a kid. I know people hate science because it's confusing. I wanted to change that. And I want more than anything to get to the parents of young children, for them to understand this is a health and wellness paradigm. It's an entertainment paradigm. Does not sacrifice entertainment for, I'm going to teach you something. And it's interesting because a lot of people have come to me and said, Joel, why don't you go to the school system? Well, first of all, the school system is owned by the powers that be, and they're never going to let this in, number one. Number two is, this is not cool if it comes from school. It's not, kids aren't going to be, oh, yay, I'm going to learn stuff about vitamins, minerals, and the periodic table of elements. They don't want that. They just want to have fun. And if you're going to see my videos and sing the songs, and I hope that everyone will, you're going to know all these scientific words without you even learning a thing. I'm going to make this the easiest science lesson you've ever had in your entire life. That's why I created the foundational for and all my cartoon characters.
Joel, how do you incorporate the principles of biohacking and also alternative medicine into your practice?
Well, so at this stage of my career, the best that I can do, I could start, there's different types of dentistry. I don't agree with almost any of them right now. So how I incorporate this into my practice really is just educating my patients. And my focus really, I love being a dentist, but when I work on one person at a time, I put my hands in their mouth, and I love helping all my patients. But I really want to spend my time sharing my information to change kids' lives, really kids who are suffering. They are putting 8-year-olds into CPAPs. And CPAP is that, the big gas mask, because kids are coming down with sleep apnea and no one will listen to what I have to say, and it's a shame. So when it comes to biohacking, I got into this health and wellness benefit for myself through biohacking and changing the different conditions around me. And biohacking really is more understanding how your biology works and knowing that your body is a sensor for the environment, taking in signals from all over, and how you allow those signals in is really fundamental to how your health develops. And so something like sunscreen is not a biohack, it's a bioattack. So it's using something artificial, and instead of it be helping you, is actually harming you. So biohacking, I think that, as this gets out into wider and wider circles, I'm less interested in, I still like the idea of biohacking because that's technically what we're doing with this. But I was bringing vitamin D to my patients, 5 years before COVID. And, I'm just happy to share this information. And I really want to share it. With my colleagues, the dentists who are not understanding how we work. And my goal really, more than anything, is to take my information and make it available. You don't have to agree with me, especially if you're an adult. You don't have to do anything that I say. For some reason, people find me sort of polarizing. But I implore you, if you have kids, forget about yourself. For them, do it for them. At least look into it, okay?
I know that you are incorporating, implementing alternative medicine into your practice, and I think that's the way to go.
Yeah. Well, so think of it this way: I know if every single person had sufficient vitamin D3, vitamin K2, and magnesium throughout their life, I probably wouldn't have as much dental work to do, because you can Google this. Dental decay, it's not technically caused by sugar. It's technically caused by low vitamin D and the immune system, because the bacteria overgrow. If your immune system is working, then you can't destroy the bacteria. So, that's what I think about that view of prevention. Prevention is always better than repair.
So when I was reading a little about your background and what you have done, I see that you talk a lot about deuterium and glyphosate. Could you talk about this and where you find it? Where is it hiding? And why does it do to our body?
Deuterium is a type of, this is a big topic, and what I want people to understand is you're seeing what I see: ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting, supplementation, eating nose to tail, all that stuff. But why does red light therapy work? Why does a ketogenic diet work? What is it about these high organic fat foods that is this is like a mystery? Everyone's just talking, and there's some groups around town, and they don't want to call me back, but they're just talking about the ketogenic diet. But why does it work? It works because a ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting depletes deuterium. Deuterium is what makes sugar bad for you. Deuterium is what makes coconut oil or beef tallow healthy for you. One is low in deuterium, one is high in deuterium. So deuterium is a form of hydrogen, and I'll give this the quickest chemistry lesson. There are elements. The first element is hydrogen, then it's helium, and each element is different combinations of electrons, protons, and neutrons. Every single element has isotopes. Hydrogen, being the simplest element, has 3 different versions. It has 2 isotopes. There's regular hydrogen. Now, an isotope varies only in the amount of neutrons. So we know that there's carbon dating, it's carbon-14. This is a type of carbon that we can use to see the age of something, which should give us a hint as to deuterium is involved in aging. But in this universe and in this world that we're in, there is regular hydrogen called protium. The first isotope is deuterium, and then the third is tritium. So what we do is a hydrogen is an electron and a proton. When we add a neutron, that's deuterium, and add a second neutron, that's tritium. Tritium is radioactive. It's not naturally found on this planet. However, deuterium is stable. It's not radioactive. It doesn't decay, and it's everywhere. And hydrogen is almost always either attached to itself, H2 as in H2 gas, or mostly to water, H2O. So you have an oxygen molecule with 2 hydrogen. Either of those hydrogens could be deuterium. So there are 3 forms of water on this planet and in this universe. There's H2O, the regular water we think of. There's HDO, that's semi-heavy water, and D2O, that is heavy water. And yes, heavy water is used to make nuclear bombs. This is very fascinating stuff. So our bodies are always trying to get rid of deuterium because this is, I like to think of it, this is the passage of time in biologic systems. So I call deuterium Father Time. And deuterium I have portrayed as a villain in my cartoons, but deuterium can be a villain or even a hero. It's just that we need to understand how Mother Nature ordered our bodies. Deuterium is the reason why eating seasonally and locally is healthy, because the amount of deuterium is related to the amount of sunlight in the ecosystem and the animals that eat the grass that we eat. So when someone gets a pineapple shipped up to Alaska and eats it in January, this is a deuterium bomb. This is extremely toxic to our bodies, even though it might seem healthy to eat fruit out of season in Alaska, but you have to go where that pineapple is grown. So let's say Hawaii, and you want to be eating that pineapple outside with your shirt off because sunlight itself depletes deuterium. So you want to stick to the foods that are grown in that local area. And that's probably one of the most common sense way to think about what deuterium is. And why is it so bad? There's two different reasons. The first one is probably the most important, is it destroys our mitochondria. And you'll see my cartoon characters for Marty mitochondria, because everyone knows the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, but people really need to understand that mitochondrial disease is really what's making everyone sick. If you don't have enough power in your body, none of your enzymes can work properly, none of your systems, your transporters, nothing can work as designed if there's not enough power coming in. So what deuterium does is it clogs the actual generation of energy inside our mitochondria, and it affects the production of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That is our electricity. ATP is a little mini rechargeable battery that we charge up in our mitochondria and goes out to do work like if you're lifting weights or running. Your muscles use up tons of ATP, and you make your entire body weight ATP every single day in your mitochondria, primarily your mitochondria. That's the first thing. The second thing is this deuterium, it's heavy. Now, when carbon-14, if you add an extra neutron, the molecular weight is quite high. It doesn't affect it. This little tiny element, hydrogen, 1 electron, 1 proton, throw a neutron in, you've doubled the weight. And every single thing that hydrogen is attached to is now affected. And hydrogen is involved in every one of our proteins, or almost every one of our proteins, amino acids. So it's everywhere in our body. And when you take a hydrogen off and you put a deuterium on instead, because that's a natural substitution, whatever it's attached to will feel the weight or the extra pull of this heavy extra neutron, and it starts to warp everything, including your DNA, and especially enzymes. Enzymes are nothing other than long chains of amino acid attached together like pearls on a string. And when we replace the hydrogen with deuterium, it starts to warp the shape of the enzymes, and enzymes work primarily on their 3D conformation, how they fold it up. Their structure is instrumental to their function. That's how they were designed by the laws of physics of Mother Nature. You pull off a hydrogen, you put on a deuterium, you've changed slightly the way the enzyme's working, and this is called the kinetic isotope effect. And that's going to be for people who have already maybe tuned out that this guy is talking crazy stuff. But I can assure you everything I'm saying is verifiable. So it starts to distort, and in my opinion, this is the real theory of aging, because as deuterium builds up inside us, we can't stop it. All we can do is try and get rid of it to the maximum, deplete deuterium as much as we can every day to have the longest life. This was discovered in high mountain communities, northern Russia, where there was populations that were living. The women were having babies like at age 50 and 60, and people were living to 100, 120. You know, these are, I don't know if this is verifiable. I can't check every fact, but it makes sense to me. And so when you keep your deuterium level low, you slow your biological aging. I have a series of podcasts coming out about deuterium, and each of the experts I've interviewed is going to give us this incredible information about.
So we shouldn't eat papaya, mango, or pineapple in wintertime.
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it at all. Think about, and so if you're going to do other deuterium depletion mechanisms, you can get away with it. It's just that you have to understand that our biology was formed before modern farming, before really farming at all. We are hunter-gatherers, and that's why I go back to my MHG, because you have to understand, we have the biology of a hunter-gatherer, and it's completely against our metabolism. And your mitochondria is your metabolism. It's against our metabolism. We're overloading our mitochondria with deuterium, and it can't produce the same amount of energy. Now, you asked the second part of that, glyphosate. What is glyphosate?
Yeah.
Well, so glyphosate does two things, does a lot of things, but the three things I'm going to tell you about. Number one, destroys the gut microbiome. Big issue. Number two, destroys the enzyme.
And why does it destroy our gut microbiome? Because it destroys the bacteria, right? And it kills the good bacteria.
Correct. It's an antibiotic. That's the first thing. The second thing, this is a poison at a molecular level. This is destroying our enzymes. And that's why I have my cartoons enzyme, to start to get people's mind around this. So wherever a deuterium is attached, it changes the actual bond strength, which alters everything, boiling point, melting point. And so this particular version of hydrogen, it's so extremely destructive to us that our entire system of enzymes is built around getting rid of deuterium. So we have the Krebs cycle. This is a little sciencey, but this is basically how we have 10 enzymatic steps before we can actually metabolize our fuel. It seems a bit excessive, but each one of those steps is actually a deuterium depletion step, trying to ensure that the enzyme is grabbing hydrogen and not deuterium. Why? Because we don't want deuterium in the mitochondria. It's very damaging. It destroys the nanomotors, the little rotors that spin. And just to not make this too confusing, my logo for MHG, Modern Hunter-Gatherers, you'll see a 6-petal flower with a little bent heart. This is a cross-section of the rotor called ATP synthase. This is step 5 in the electron transport chain in our mitochondria, where we generate ATP. We take ADP and make it ATP. And this is done in this thing that I did a cross-section, and I said, wow, it's a 6-petal flower with a heart in the middle. This is perfect. Mother Nature is stunning and beautiful. And this rotor, the heart itself actually spins, the outside stays put, but that spinning is destroyed by, instead of a hydrogen going in, a deuteron or a deuterium atom goes in there, and it clogs, it either slows or breaks that delicate rotor that's spinning, made of protein.
So Joel, I was reading about your work, and I see that you give a lot of significance to Weston Price's findings of modern health and dentistry. And I have 5 kids, so since many years I realized that the formula you can find in the supermarket, it's full of garbage. It's seed oils and synthetic vitamins, all kinds of additives. So when they're done with breastfeeding, I give them raw goat milk. But I've also, what I'm about to do actually is my own formula with all kinds of natural ingredients. Have you seen people doing this? Is this something that you would recommend?
Yes, I completely recommend it. One of my hygienists, she's of sort of Russian descent, and she She moved to America when she was old enough to remember the ways of her grandparents. And after she had read all my stuff, heard my podcast, when she stopped breastfeeding, she started feeding her child ground up liver and, all the things.
Yeah.
Think about, what would parents feed children after they're finished breastfeeding? What does a bird do? A bird chews up something and then spits it into their kid's mouth. So yeah, I think it's great. And I think that understanding, what raw goat's milk is 100% tied into our evolutionary history. Goat's an easy animal to keep. So, and I love the idea that these ruminants, like a goat, it's going to eat the green grass, and then we eat the goat and you use the goat's milk. We don't eat the grass. We can survive on the grass, but it's not our food.
Yeah.
So yeah, I absolutely commend that. And any formulation, just thinking about what's in mother's milk, the nutrients, it's high fat. And so sure, goat's milk would be wonderful.
Do you think there is an association between the modern diet and what we are feeding the kids and their need for braces?
Yes, 100%. So understand, this is, I wanted to sort of discuss the airway syndrome here because people are talking about, nasal breathing. So we were designed to breathe through our nose. That's what Mother Nature intended, okay? Now, when we breathe through our mouth, at night especially, it causes a narrowing of the palate. And the palate is the base of the nose. So when you have a narrow palate, you now have a totally narrow airway. So we will do 2 stages of orthodontics for kids. At age 7 or 8, the child will go for palatal expansion. And then at age 11, 12, or 13, we'll do the regular orthodontics because there isn't enough room for all the teeth. And why is the palate narrow? Well, if you don't have any nasal breathing. Why can't you breathe through your nose? Vitamin D deficiency, vitamin K2 deficiency. The cartilage, the nasal septum is cartilage. If you don't have vitamin K2 in your diet, that nasal septum will become improperly calcified and not allow for nasal breathing. So many of my patients have to go and have their noses surgerized because they have a deviated septum. And what that really means is not from an injury. They weren't fighters that now can't breathe through their nose. They did not develop normal nasal breathing and they breathe through their mouth. And you can test this on your child. Ask them, hold their lips apart and ask them to swallow. You'll see the tongue come forward to seal the space. They can't even close their mouth. So every time they swallow, they have to put their tongue forward. So the syndrome is narrow palate, tongue thrust swallow, and then a retruded pushback mandible from not enough calcium. And this is a classic presentation. We call it a class 2 skeletal defect in dentistry, but it's because your child or you growing up didn't have enough vitamin D3 to get calcium in, didn't have enough vitamin K2, and the combination of colds, flus, allergies, and even just inflammation of the nasal passages from low vitamin D alone. Vitamin D is anti-inflammatory. It allows the production of over 200 antimicrobial proteins. If you're not making those 200 proteins, one of the areas, and probably the most critical area that you're going to sacrifice, is the breathing through your nose. Once you don't breathe through your nose, everything gets messed up, and that includes your sleep. So now you're trying to breathe through your mouth, and what happens in the whole pediatric sleep apnea syndrome, as with adults, is that your body has a choice. It can sleep or it can breathe. Breathing wins every time. So the sleep begins to be destroyed. If your child isn't growing and developing, it's not genetic, it's environmental. The reason they're not growing is they're not sleeping properly because your body has to be paralyzed for you to grow evenly. Kids grow in their sleep. You know that as a parent, they grow in their sleep. But if the child isn't sleeping properly, I personally didn't go through puberty till I was almost 17 years old. And the reason is I was choking miserably in my sleep and my body didn't get a chance to grow. That's the overall, and the sad part is that all these things are being done, palatal expansion, great, that's allopathic treatment. The palate's narrow, let's widen it. Why not go to the root cause? Let's think about where will we get these D3 K2 from? Living outdoors or supplementing properly.
So how has sleep apnea syndrome changed over the years in your practice?
Well, so keep in mind that sleep apnea is a relatively new syndrome. And I believe I'd like you to think about death by natural causes. What does that mean? Well, let's say you live to 97, maybe 105, and you die peacefully in your sleep. Well, I'm going to put a bunch of pieces together for you that may or may not make sense. And this is an idealized version of reality. So in your skin, you have cholesterol. It's what makes us animals. That cholesterol, when it's hit by UVB radiation of a specific wavelength, gets transformed to vitamin D. Vitamin D is essential for your body. Over time, your cholesterol begins to be deuterated. And that means that the hydrogen that's normally at that breakage can be replaced by deuterium. And now when sunlight hits it, because the bond strength to deuterium is stronger, it's harder for you to make vitamin D. So over time, as more deuterium builds up in your body, it decreases the amount of vitamin D that you can make. Now, this used to happen at the end of life, when you're older, if we were living out in the wild. And then over time, you would start to slowly choke in your sleep, and then you die that death of natural causes. Now we're seeing kids with such low vitamin D levels being born. Sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, that's nothing other than a vitamin D deficiency. That is sleep apnea at the extreme. Your child died because your doctor didn't learn about vitamin D in medical school and still doesn't care. That is the root cause of SIDS. So the entire, and so we didn't see this as much because people lived outside, number one, and there was no glyphosate. Glyphosate destroys your ability to activate vitamin D. You can say, oh, I'm in the sun and I got tested. I'm in the sun, I'm supplementing vitamin D, but my level's still low. The enzyme that converts that vitamin D into the form that your doctor measured, the 25-OHD, that enzyme is destroyed by glyphosate. So as the amount of glyphosate rises in the world, it's destroying many enzymes. It's destroying the enzymes of the electron transport chain of your mitochondria, which is what's causing metabolic disease.
That's so sad.
Deuterium and glyphosate work together because those enzymes were designed to avoid deuterium. Glyphosate destroys the enzymes. So this is increasing right in step with the use of glyphosate and other chemicals, but glyphosate is the big one because we're told that it's safe, and it is safe for humans, but it's not safe to our microbes. So that's where the issue is, and 90% of what we really are is that gut microbiome or our microbes, even everywhere in our body. So that hopefully that and so the sleep apnea incidence is on the rise. And to anyone listening, I had a dream last night that I was in an Uber. And I saw the driver fall asleep and we crashed and everyone woke up in the car. And I said, what's wrong with you people? Every one of you has sleep apnea. And they're all like, oh, I sleep great. And to anyone who says I sleep great, do a sleep study and you'll see the real truth. So
when it comes to sleep apnea, what are some early signs?
Bruxism, first sign, snoring, bedwetting, thumb sucking, ADHD behavior, allergies, flus, colds, poor immune function, or behavior. These ADHD behavior is sleep deprivation. What happens? You have 5 kids. What happens when they didn't get their naps? Or what happens when they're tired? They get obnoxious and cranky. That's in our nature. That's not ADHD. That's vitamin D deficiency causing poor sleep and really sleep deprivation.
So, to prevent sleep apnea, I think you already mentioned some of the ideas, right?
Yeah, we don't take blood from kids, so we don't test their vitamin D level. But if we did, we find it very low.
Very low.
You can definitely supplement around the symptoms. And again, if your child is healthy, that's wonderful. But so many kids have these symptoms. If you're the one taking it, especially if you have like 3 or 4 or 5 kids, it's usually the youngest kids, the ones who mom had them when she was already vitamin D deficient. These are the kids who already have poor immune function. So generally speaking, my older brother was very healthy. I was not. So he's 2 years older than me. So I'm going to assume that living in Canada, my mother just never replenished her vitamin D stores. So I was born that sickly child, and it's affected me my entire life. So what to watch for, those symptoms. And then don't be afraid to supplement your child's vitamin D. You're not going to overdose them. There really are no symptoms I can tell you about vitamin D overdoses. It only happens if you're taking crazy amounts of supplements. And just keep in mind, I have a free ebook that lays this out with links so that if you don't believe what I say, click on the link. You're going to see the dosing is confusing. The levels are confusing. I think maybe intentionally. If medical doctors can't figure this out, then how's the general public going to? What I want to say is that 40,000 international units of vitamin D is 1 milligram. So I tell my patients to take 10,000. Most of them say either 5 or 10,000. So when I say to you, take 10,000 IU of vitamin D, patients are like, whoa, are you trying to kill me? If I say and what it really is 0.25 milligrams. Say, please take 0.25 milligrams of vitamin D. They're like, whoa, that's not enough. So very confusing, but do not go by the RDA. The RDA may have been true 40 years ago when everyone lived outside and there was no air conditioning. But right now, you want a supplement. It's about 1,000 international units per 25 pounds. That's what I recommend.
Apart from supplementing, you could eat grass-fed beef, you could eat fat fish, and
if you're going to eat a very healthy diet and with organ meats, you're going to get some vitamin D. It's especially in fatty fish for sure. But again, I love it if everyone were eating that way, but it's kind of hard, especially probably with kids.
It is, yeah. So Joel, do you think there is something that I missed that you wanted to talk about?
No, I think we've covered a lot, and I really want to make it clear that the most important thing that I'm going to do is share this message and put it into popular culture, because this has been information that's been kind of verifiable since 1938, really. And if you look at the studies, this has been tested, and it's pretty true. So I don't want to waste my time trying to prove to people that this is true. Everyone has Google, and they can look things up on PubMed. What I really want to do is I want people to understand that this is such an easy thing to expose your kids to. It's too late for people once they've sort of reached a certain point. They're not going to believe that they don't eat egg whites. They can eat the yolk. They're not going to believe this stuff. But I think it's really important to think about the younger generation and educate them in the basics and understanding of science so that they can be educated and not fooled by the powers that be. They're going to say, oh, this study shows that and this study shows that. We don't need studies to show you something that's obvious.
Joel, where can people find you?
Easiest way to find me is at drjoelgould.com. However, that's where I have all my stuff. But I really want people to follow me on Instagram, because it doesn't matter what you do in this world. If you don't have a big Instagram following, you're nothing. So my Instagram, just type into your search bar modern hunter gatherers, and I'll come up right away. And in that Instagram, you can see my link tree. It goes to all my stuff. You can go to my website to download my free ebook, Love Feedback. I also have an ebook called Reversing Crohn's Disease Organically, and that's on Amazon. And that's for anyone who has friends who have autoimmune disease. It applies to all autoimmune diseases. It's my story. It's not medical advice. This is how I reversed my Crohn's disease and the scientific studies that support what I did. So that's the best way to get a hold of me. And I really thank you for giving me this exposure, because I really want this message. Weston Price's book didn't go viral. I hope that mine will.
Thank you so much. It's been really interesting talking to you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Hunger for Change podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I also wanted to take a moment to talk about Naturally, my brand of healthy food products. At Naturally, we are on a mission to change the world through what we eat. This is why we worked so hard to make products that are delicious and also good for you. They're all gluten-free, have no refined sugars, no sweeteners, and no additives. At the moment, Naturally is only available in Europe. However, we're working to expand to other continents, so stay tuned. If you're in Spain, you can head over to our website, naturally.com, and it will take you to our online store. And if you're in Italy, Portugal, Germany, Poland, France, the Netherlands, or in Sweden, you can find them on Amazon. I will leave you all these links in the description anyway, so that you can find them. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.